Welcome, I'm Rose Martin, and we're right around the corner with New York Times bestselling author of, see if you can stick with me, The Kitchen House and Glory Over Everything. Who am I talking about? You're right. It's Kathleen Grissom. We are so excited to have her with us. And guess what? As a child, she loved books and libraries so much and became so immersed in her characters that when she read Anne of Green Gables as a child, she actually believed she was adopted and went to her mother and made her prove that she wasn't. So let's think about that. We know the depth of her characters becomes so real. They're the family members that you know inside and out, the ones that can't get away with any kind of secrets because we know them too well. Kathleen does such a wonderful job with her characters that each of them absolutely do become her family members. Her books are spiritual gifts, and I'll let her explain that to you a little bit later, because you know the feeling that this fascinating woman has is that she understands and knows in the very depth of her soul that her job is to tell the story so that all of us, we can see and feel exactly what she sees and exactly what she feels as she puts those words on paper. Let's meet her. Kathleen, thank you so much for joining me and all of us for Right Around the Corner.
Thank you for having me.
It's exciting for us to meet you and to learn about the process. These books have taken off, and I thoroughly enjoyed The Kitchen House and Glory Over Everything, and I can't wait to get in the depth of chatting about both of those. Before we do, you've got a really interesting process that helps you develop characters. Share a little bit about that with me.
Well, I don't know that I have this process. I think the process happens for me.
Okay.
The way this works, I always say to someone that when they're trying to understand how it is that I write, I say, if you tell me about last Thanksgiving and how that worked for you, what happened, and if you get into real detail, you can bring me right into the scene, and you can even make me laugh, and you can even make me, if you tell me something and really pull me in, you can make me cry. And that's what happens for me. These stories aren't something I'm making up. They come to me fully formed. The characters come fully formed.
Let's pause that for a minute.
Okay.
Because that's a really unusual and very exciting way to develop a book. Instead of thinking who might be in it and what they're going to do, instead, is it like a movie that starts in your head, or how do you get to know the characters?
That's exactly what happens. The opening is usually unexpected. I have no idea how it comes or where it comes from. But once I have that opening, once I have the scene, the other characters just walk onto the stage and they start to do something, they start to play a part, they start to speak, and people ask me how I get the dialect. I hear the dialect, I hear them speak. So I just write down. What I'm trying to do is write exactly what I'm seeing. That's my job.
And you know, you do that so beautifully.
Oh, thank
and
you.
in The Kitchen House, to start there, each of those characters we know so well, and you talk about how they come to you. Were there some characters that jumped ahead of others, or who felt that they wanted their story told more so than some of the others, for instance, in the story?
Well, in The Kitchen House, I wrote the first draft only in Lavinia's voice, because that was what I saw, and I was seeing everything through her eyes. But then after I had written the first draft, someone whose opinion I really respected said to me, you know, this is a book about slavery. Don't you think you should have a black voice in here? So I went back and I sort of sat down with my characters and I said, whoever wants to jump in, jump in. And with that, Belle just came barreling in, and she had something to say and was very definite about what she wanted to say. So I just let her have her say whenever she came up as I was reading through the story. I now think I could have gone back and called on any of them, but Belle seemed to be the one who wanted to speak the most. So that's why I gave it to her. So
that's so interesting, because if you look at Belle's position in the story too, and what a pivotal figure she is, that she was one of the first to come through as a way to say, let's tell this story and then bring others on board. Were there points in time in the construction of the story and putting the pieces together that you weren't quite sure where it was going, or did you always know?
I never knew where it was going. Every day when it would shut down, when I would get tired, it would stop. The process would just stop. It was as though the movie flicked off. And then I would think, what's going to happen? And I would try to imagine, or I'd be thinking about it, and I was always wrong. I would go back the next day and I would think, what's going to happen? And I would then reread what I had written the day before, and that was as though I was flicking that switch on again, and the story would just start to continue and further itself.
So you would just get quiet, and the characters with different voices or different ones would come forward, and that's how the story would begin to unfold.
Well, I always pray first, and I ask that this be only from God, and that I be used. And so that's what I always do before I sit down to write. So that I have my little altar upstairs, and my,
and using that gift, that God-given gift, to be able to tell the story in a voice that's going to resonate with people and touch their hearts, as your books do so beautifully. Okay. Did you ever try to change the story a little bit to think, Belle said this, or Lavinia said this, or one of my other characters came through, and I'm thinking, you know, I think it might be better if we go this route?
Well, I found out early on that I couldn't change the actual story. I wanted the captain to tell Ms. Martha who Belle was. And I
wanted
thought,
that too.
right? I thought it would simplify things, it would make everyone happy, and we'd have a much better story. So that was my very first example of where I thought I could change the story. And when I did that, it was as though the characters just stopped freeze frame, and they looked at me, and just almost as they were saying to me, well, that isn't our story, you go ahead and write yours, but we'll be out of here. And they just dissipate. So I learned I had to go back and tell the story exactly the way they were giving it to me. So that's what I do.
And say yes.
And just allow them to tell. It isn't my story to tell. And understand that. I needed to understand that.
As the characters developed and the story made its way through, how did you know when the end was going to be?
I had no idea. As a matter of fact, I have a friend in New York, and I had called her about 2 weeks before the ending of the book, and I said, this story is going to go on forever. And then all of a sudden, it just went boom, just like that. And when I would try to write more, or when I would try to pick up another thread, it just wouldn't happen. It was finished. When it was finished, it was finished.
So, and it was finished in their voices the way it needed to be finished.
The way they wanted it finished, not the way I wanted it finished.
And they wrote a beautiful story with you as that channel, right, opening up your gifts and putting those beautiful words on paper. The research really intrigued me. The fact that you went to so many different places, and your background, nurse and graphic design, wasn't as if you had an historical background, research background. What was the research like for doing these books?
Well, for both of them, I knew nothing about that time period, certainly specific to that time period. So I just went ahead and I did what came naturally. I first started out at libraries, which I love, love libraries, especially the little community libraries. And so I went to those libraries. I spoke to any of the people that I thought would know something about that time period in the community. And then I began to extend. I went up to UVA, to their library. I went to Longwood Library. And then, of course, the little local libraries that had Appomattox and Farmville. So I used all of the library resources. And then I started to go to some plantations that were renovated. And there's one over by Clarksville called Presswood Plantation. And that was the one that I really got a lot of very specific information from. So I gather all of that, and then people say, well, how do I use that? And what I really do is just let my characters pick and choose what they want to better tell their story.
Do you feel like they kind of led you also to the places you needed to find out a little more information, to almost uncover the treasure?
That's
right?
exactly right. That's exactly right. I don't know what I'm looking for, but all of a sudden I'll see something and I'll just get excited, and now I know that they want me to get excited about that because they want the information. But that's exactly how it happens.
And that's exhilarating, right? When you find that and you put it, and we feel that when we read each of the pages, and each of those characters jump off the page. And so you're finished with the kitchen house. You're ready to put it aside. How long did it take before the kitchen house, when you finished it, till it came to print, or to being published? I'm sorry.
Well, it took me 5 years to find an agent.
Wow.
And I just wouldn't take no for an answer. I knew from the beginning that this was some kind of special gift. I just knew the story was meant to be told. And I knew then, I don't know why, but I knew that I was supposed to get it published. So I was determined to go the traditional way. So I studied the business, I studied publishing and what had to be done, found out I needed to write a query letter, so I did that, and began to submit. So 5 years later, no agent. I had one, but that didn't work out. So I really didn't have a clue of what I was going to do. And then I read, do you remember with Oprah when there was that big brouhaha about James Frey and that book?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. And they said he would never be published again. Well, there was Eric Simonoff was an agent in New York City who apparently went to James Frey and said, if you write another book, I'll get it published for you. James Frey wrote the book, and Eric Simonoff sold it for $1 million.
Wow.
And I thought, that's the man for me.
What is his number?
Exactly. So I found his email address, and I broke a rule at that time, that was years ago, where you didn't submit to agents by email. But I sent him an email. He sent me one back the next morning, and he said, sounds interesting, send the manuscript. So I did. And then I got a phone call maybe a week later from a woman, Rebecca Gradinger, and she said, Kathy, I love this story. So that was how I got my agent.
So it was meant to be, absolutely meant to be. So for people who are looking to try to publish a book and they have a story, it may take a long time to find the right person. And the whole idea that there are changes and revisions, even though this came through in the voices of your characters, were there things that needed to be changed or altered before it was actually printed?
Oh, absolutely. Glory Over Everything is the one that I remember the most because it was the most recent. But I think we did about 7 drafts on that before we were ready to go.
Where did the title for that book come from?
Glory Over Everything. We were looking for a title, couldn't find a title. We were getting down to the wire. And then Rebecca, this amazing agent that I have, I love her, said to me, she called up one day and she said, how about Glory Over Everything? And I said, Rebecca, that's a beautiful title. Where did it come from? And she said, it's a Harriet Tubman quote.
Really?
So, yeah. So I said, well, that's nice, but let me think about it for a while. So I went online and I reread Harriet Tubman's story. And as I read it through, I got to the part where she talks about how she was finally free. And she looked at her hands and there was such a glory over everything. The sun came up.
That gives me goosebumps knowing what Glory Over Everything is all about. And the Friedman, I don't want to give anything away because we want to make sure everybody reads it. And wow, isn't that something?
Well, the difference, Glory Over Everything was beautiful when she said it. But if you read the very next paragraph, she talks about how there was this bitter drop in her cup of joy. She was free, but she had left everyone that she loved behind. And I knew that was Jamie's story.
Oh, it sure was. And Jamie emerged as the central figure out in Philadelphia now for this part of the story. And he's living, I don't think I'm going to give it away because it opens up that he's living as an aristocrat with this secret that's buried. And the way the story unfolds with him with that secret was so compelling. And I know as I'm reading it, I'm a little nervous at points in time during the story, wondering how it's going to unfold. Was he the strongest character that came through, or were there a few others that felt, you know, there's a piece of my story left to be told too?
I always could see Jamie over here, just catch a glimpse of him. And I'd see him, after I finished The Kitchen House, I'd see Jamie sort of just as a wealthy aristocrat, and I knew he was keeping a secret. I knew he was passing as white. And on the other side, just on the periphery, I could see Suki.
Oh, I love Suki.
And I did too. But those were the only 2 characters that I felt or knew about from The Kitchen House. And when Jamie blocked me, I was starting to write my 3rd book about Crow Mary, and Jamie came, he just literally blocked me and let me know that I was meant to tell his story next. So that's why I then began research on Philadelphia, wealthy aristocracy, 1830.
And that again, you said yes, because after The Kitchen House, you were ready to write Crow Mary. And we were planning on doing Glory Over Everything until Jamie emerged and he's like, nope.
That's right.
I'm next in line.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I had no intention of writing Glory Over Everything.
Wow, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So when we think about the other characters, especially Suki.
Yes.
and some of the others in that book. And again, without giving it away to the readers, because I want them to make sure they read it, there are a few people that emerge in this story that I thought might be gone for a while and that I wasn't really happy to see again. And it made me a little nervous. When you're in the process of even, channeling and working with these characters, what's the feeling that you get as some of these little tidbits and other storylines begin to emerge? Like, is it the same thing as we see as a reader? Like, oh no.
I think it's probably very close to what you feel as a reader, because I sense something's coming up. And when I was writing The Kitchen House, I would start to sense something, but because I didn't know what to expect, I would start to pace. I'd get up and I'd pace, and sometimes I'd start to cry because I was so afraid of what was coming. With Glory, it was a little easier because I understood the process a little bit more. So it wasn't quite as intense for me to write it. I don't know that Glory was as intense story, as emotional a story as The Kitchen House was. So that's kind of...
Do you feel like the characters were then pleased with the final product? Did you feel a sense of closure, or that you had done them proud by telling that story in a way that it went out into the world so it could be learned and appreciated, and we learned about parts of society that maybe people hadn't really gotten a glimpse in before that was really authentic?
I don't think that it's my business to feel whether I did a good job or not. It's my business to do a good job because it's a gift. And so I do my best. But I think that I'm not meant to know whether I did a good job. Their ego gets involved. And it's not my story. It has nothing to do with me. It comes through me.
What's important for you for a reader? So if someone who's picking up your book, what's important for you to know when they read the story?
I hadn't really thought about that. They don't belong to me. That part doesn't belong to me. My job is to experience what I'm experiencing and trying to put down on paper what they want me to tell. And then after I'm finished, the rest of it really has nothing to do with me anymore.
So you're able to just kind of step back, your part's done.
That's
and
right.
then what happens from there happens with the book, how it touches hands of people all across the country and internationally.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, you speak to, and you have over 1,000 book clubs. How does that work?
Well, people at the back of The Kitchen House, there was a notation that said, if you're interested in having a book club, call through, get a hold of me on my website, so they can reach out to me on my website, which is KathleenGrissom.com, and there go to contact, and on contact, you can write a request and ask that I call in. So that's all that happens. That's what we do.
And you've done that across the country, and you continue to do that.
Yes, and in Canada as well.
Wonderful. So if people are reading Glory as part of their book club, they could find you on that contact information and have you call in and chat with their book club members.
Most definitely.
Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful thing that you do, to share your work and to share your story. What's the feedback been from the African American community with how you dealt with the idea of slavery and in the authentic voice of Belle and Suki and Mama and Papa and so many others?
I have had nothing but a positive reaction from the African American people. As a matter of fact, I was invited up to the Links. They're a connection to the Charlottesville Festival of the Book, and they have me for their luncheons with each publication.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
That is wonderful. When you think about the characters and you think about the feeling that has gone into the development of them, do any of them still kind of linger with you, or when the book is finished, again, that's done and then you're on to the next story and you can kind of put it away because, as you said, your job is done?
Yeah. They don't linger, but what I find is that, as an example, after The Kitchen House, I told you Jamie was sort of on one side on the periphery, and then on the other side Suki. So after Glory, I have Jamie and his family over on one side, and I have his one daughter over on the other side. So I know they're there. So whether or not that will ever move into anything, I don't know.
Well, who knows if there'll be another one, right?
I have no idea.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting. Would you mind, and would you be willing to read a passage?
I'd love to.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to. So this would be from Glory Over Everything.
Okay.
And This is, I think, where, oh, this is Suki. And Suki was sold in the kitchen house. So many people ask me what happened to Suki. And this is after she was first taken. By the way, this also introduces Jake. Rankin shows up again in Glory
Don't
Over
like
Everything.
him. Do not like him.
No, but he has a son, Jake, and his son is biracial as well. So Jake is concerned that he could be sold into slavery by his very own father, as one of his brothers was. So we're introduced here. This is in Suki's voice. 3 days after they take me from Miss Lavinia, the slave traders come. Ida and me jump awake when Rankin and Jake bust open the door in the middle of the night. When Rankin starts tying up my wrists, I yell to Ida, "Go get Miss Lavinia." But Ida just stands there quiet. "Shut up." Rankin talks to me in a way that makes my mouth go dry. He grunts at me. "Niggers acting like white folk. There's one up in that big house that needs selling," he said to Jake. "That Jamie, she the next one, he the next one to go." "You mean the one with the bad eye?" Jake asks. "Yeah, he's the one." "He's white as me," Jake says. Rankin snorts. "He's white as you, but that don't mean that you're both not niggers." The dark look that goes across Jake's face scares me so much that I start to call out again for Miss Lavinia. That's when Jake takes a rag that was tied around his neck and comes at me. "Don't let them take me," I say to Ida before Jake ties the rag tight around my mouth. Ida is pulling on her dress, but she stays quiet. She follows us outside and watches as they tie me to 3 other men who all look done in. They sit as soon as I'm tied and the rope pulls me down to the ground with them. I start to cry, but with the rag in my mouth I choke. My tongue burns when I work to loosen the rag, and I keep looking for Ida to help, but her head is down and turned away. When the traders go off for a drink with Rankin and Jake, Ida comes over. "Remember who you is," she says in my ear when she loosens up the rag. "You no slave like me, you raised like a white girl. You knows how to read and write. Remembers that and hold your head up like a white girl. That way they buy you for the big house someplace." By now I'm so scared I can't cry. I keep looking up toward the big houses and wonder why nobody's coming to get me. Where is everybody? Where are they taking me? Nobody's telling me nothing. When the traders come back, one of them slaps in the air with his whip, and the men I'm tied to jump up like a gun goes off. Before I know what's happening, they start out walking, and I get jerked along so fast that I can hardly keep up. When the trader whacks his whip again, cracks down beside me, and I'm so scared that my water starts running down my legs. "Keep a good eye on her," Rankin calls out to Jake, and that's how I know that Jake is coming along with the slave traders. In the next days, we stop at the other farms. They got slaves to sell, so others are tied up with us, but I'm the only girl. It's cold and I'm too scared to cry, and all the men stay quiet as me. They keep their heads down and move ahead, and I wonder why they don't have no fight. Then I hear 2 of them talking at night and find out that one man was already killed for getting loose and trying to run. In those next days, Jake don't leave me alone. After he takes the rag from my mouth, he keeps talking smart until I finally sass back. He laughs. "Oh, listen to this one from the big house. Don't she think she's somebody? I guess we'll get to find out what she looks like when they take those fine clothes off and set her up on that block for everybody to see."
Wow. Wow. And there's so much more of that story to unfold.
Yes.
You know, I, for one, just am so grateful that you listened, and you listened to those voices and those characters emerge, so that you could pull out your pencil and you could bring those stories to life, so they could be enjoyed and shared with so many people who've been able to listen and read your work and really become part of the kitchen house and the Glory Over Everything. I wish that we had so much more time, because I want to know so much more, and I have so many more questions. I hope that when Crow Mary is coming to fruition, will you come back?
I would love to.
I would love that, and that you would be able to share that story with us too. So I want to just thank you so much for not only your wisdom and for having the courage to put these words on paper, but for listening to your gifts. And I hope that everyone will do that too. If they've got a gift that they want to share and they want to bring that forward, I want them to do that. And you've been a great example for us for doing that. So for the Kitchen House and Glory Over Everything, and everyone, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
And I want to thank all of you for spending time with us for this show, and I'll see you next time when we're right around the corner.